Hoffman Show. That's us. Greg Hoffman here. Anthony Haney there. Here on the Team 980. We got all kinds of... It's a potpourri kind of day, Anthony. First of all, I love your hat.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Wow, that's why. Rooster was in here. You were, but it's because my mic was quiet.
Oh, okay.
That was the thing, because sometimes when I move the computers around in here, also, is that my mic making crackling noises, or is that just my headphones?
I think your headphones.
Okay, that's good, because that means no one else is hearing them, and now I sound like a person who's hearing things. Sometimes when I move the computers around in here to get set for the show, the wires knock the mic levels. Also, Chris Russell is the loudest person in the history of the planet, and so the mic level that he needs, because this is Chris Russell's voice at all, I can't even do it. I'm afraid I'm going to hurt my vocal cords. Is very different than what I need. So I had to give that the old boosty boost to get back in phase, if you will. So potpourri of things on the show today. We have previews of both NCAA tournaments through multiple angles. Ben Pickman from The Athletic is going to take care of both angles for us on the women's tournament. We're going to go through the bracket with him, and we're going to talk about some of the top WNBA prospects, considering the Mystics have 3 picks in the top 6 in the April draft, which is now, what's today? Today's the 19th. The WNBA draft, Anthony, is less than a month away.
Good gracious. It's moving, man.
Yeah. There's going to be like 3 to 5 new Mystics in a month. It's crazy. Like probably a month from like Monday or something, it'll be media day or something silly.
Yeah.
So
I forgot how quickly the WNBA draft is following March Madness.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's absolutely bananas wild how they do it. But that is how they do it. And so we'll play along and go from there. But our mission is to make sure that people are locked in, that people are informed. And so we'll do that with Ben Pickman coming up at either 5:15 or 5:30. We'll see how long our chat at 5 o'clock is. That will be one of the determining factors. Jeremy Wu from ESPN, who is one of their NBA draft analysts, he is going to join us to go through the top NBA draft prospects. I kind of am going to say, Anthony, outside of Cooper Flagg, because I feel like people know Cooper Flagg at this point.
Yep.
So we'll talk about some of the other top prospects in the tournament. And then we will have our second consecutive let's go through the entire bracket with someone who knows it better than us. Yesterday, Kevin Brown gave you everything you needed to know in 20 minutes. We made a stop in Denton Day's office before we came in today to our studio here. Denton's office is just a conference room down the hall that he doodles on the whiteboard and does fantastic digital content from. But we decided to do a funny bit where we went and sat in Denton's office and we recorded a tournament preview. So that'll be at 6 o'clock. Dave Johnson, head of Wizards and Jazz tonight at 6:30. So we are locked, loaded, and ready to go. And we have, to start the show, Anthony Haney, a little bit, and I do mean just a little bit, of breaking news.
Breaking news. Oh, snap, news is broken. Breaking news.
Per the old multiple reports, Adam Schefter's the one that I'm going to read this verbatim from. A reworked deal for Deebo in D.C. Oh, what a clever headline. The Commanders are guaranteeing $17 million of Deebo Samuel's previously non-guaranteed salary for this season, along with adding another $3 million worth of incentives per sources. Samuel now will play this season on a one-year deal worth up to $20 million, including $17 million guaranteed. Samuel's agent, Tory Dandy, and the Commanders' general manager, Adam Peters, negotiated the deal. I'm going to be honest with you, Anthony. I don't really know what this means a whole lot. This is obviously news. There is not a ton here, I think, that impacts anything but ultimately Deebo Samuel's bank account. Like, I don't think this is going to have any big deal on the cap. Like, Deebo, as long as he was on the roster, was going to count roughly, from what I understood, $17 million against the cap anyway. So my question is like, once, like, the team wouldn't probably do this unless they get something out of it. So is there a chance that they moved around some money in a way that they added a void year or something that I don't know. If everything's guaranteed in salary, that should mean it just counts on the cap as is. But did they do something to bring his cap number down and push some money into the future? Maybe, but it doesn't sound like it. That the way that's worded from Schefter is like you were going to count $17 million, even though it was non-guaranteed. Technically, they could have cut him after like training camp or whatever, and per game roster bonuses or whatever. But like those numbers kind of go on the cap now. So like, yeah, if you cut him after training camp because training camp's a bomb scare, would you save that money? Yes. But what are you going to do with $17 million in September? I would much rather have a happier Deebo Samuel. And so what the team gets out of it, hopefully, is a happier player who is, feels good about the franchise. You add a little bit of incentives. And so obviously incentive is good. And like, let's have this guy wanting to go out there and hit these incentive numbers. Certainly worked for like Zach Ertz last year, who hit a bunch of numbers on the last day of the regular season and made himself a whole bunch of money. Remember us talking about that on the show?
Yep.
So if that's the case, like, is this news? Sure. Do I fully understand why it happened? If I'm going to be honest with you guys, and I think at this point, over the last couple of weeks, that I don't know nothing on this contract stuff. Like, I understand a lot of the fundamentals and the basics of it. This one, it seems like it's much more of an interpersonal relationship thing where we're going to try to make sure we get the best out of Deebo Samuel. Like, we traded for you for a reason. We're not trading for you to cut you. So having this salary be non-guaranteed feels very silly. It's going to count on our cap pretty much no matter what. So let's just guarantee it. We can give you a little bit more in incentives. And if you go out and ball out, then, well, we've already paid you a lot of money. We've shown you good faith, and maybe it helps them get a better number next year. But there's no long-term commitment here. So buying yourself goodwill and future salary cap space, that's about my best guess, Ant.
I mean, I think your guess is pretty on, I think it's online, to be honest. Again, like Deebo, he wanted money. He wanted a contract extension. I think them guarantee him a little bit of money just up front, I think is going to make him happy, make him go out there, and give Washington the best. But I think it will also, if he does go out there and ball out, I think the conversation we had yesterday about Terry, about Deebo, about them being two, I think he really might actually want to demand, more money than the 20, that you had proposed, like a 2 for $40 or whatever it is. So, I mean, again, I think it would just be good for him to go out there, be happy, and us get the best out of him. And if he ends up, wanting to come back and re-sign with us, I think that would be great as well. But I think it'll be a little scary when it comes to the financials about like what he might demand or want to command.
He's got the contract that I currently see on Over the Cap, which I don't think is the updated one yet, is $16 million in base salary. His cap number is 17.4, and it's non-guaranteed. If they cut him, there's zero dead money, and they save 17.4. So they've now guaranteed that, but like on their books, they were probably already mentally guaranteeing that. It's just because it's not guaranteed doesn't mean it doesn't count against the cap or anything. So, they wouldn't have traded for him if they didn't plan on keeping him. So this in many ways is just formalizing the agreement and the commitment to each other in a way that's an act of good faith and hopefully pays off for them in the long term. There's plenty of other changes potentially coming to the NFL, though, as well. New rule changes that have been proposed today, including the banning of the tush push. Again, is there actually a smart something somewhere to be done about that play, or is there nothing to be done at all? Plus, the Lions don't seem too happy about what the Commanders did to them last year, and the fact that they had to play Washington there in their first playoff game. So they proposed a solution that would change the way the playoffs are done. And while it would be fun and probably easier radio to just dunk on this idea, I actually don't hate it either. We will discuss some of the proposed rule changes in the NFL next on the Hoffman Show. some people shouldn't be allowed out in public.
Why not?
You know our guy D Will?
Oh yeah.
Who calls in? He just hit me on Instagram, like literally 4 seconds before we came out of break. So I posted to Instagram a screenshot of my recent calls, and then you calling me before the show yesterday is the only non-spam call currently on my recent calls list.
That's insane.
Not kidding. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This goes back to yesterday. If I want to go back to Monday, 10, 11. 10 of my last 11 calls are spam calls.
That's not the life you deserve, dude.
No, look at that. Look at all that red.
That is a lot of red.
And then there's Anthony Haney, FaceTime video. Because that's how Ant calls me before the show.
Spam?
No.
I'm joking. I don't either.
But D Will hits me and he goes, I want to read this verbatim. Craig, that was me. I was wondering why you kept sending me to voicemail. I had an amazing offer for you. That's
Bravo.
Funny. It's a funny Instagram message. I hope he's listening to the show so he gets to gets his moment to shine, but I will respond in the next break.
It would be insane if the spam numbers were all the same, though.
They're all, well, I know they're spam. I know it ain't a real thing because they're all 864 numbers, which is the upstate South Carolina area code that I have because I got my cell phone number when I was still in high school and lived there because that's where I grew up. And ain't nobody calling me from that area code. Not a soul is calling me. That's not saved as a contact in my phone. So, good times. I did get spam. I got a spam voicemail the other day from someone claiming to be in the Department of Revenue in South Carolina. It was a Columbia area code, which is the state capital down there. And I was like, homie, I don't got no revenue in South Carolina. I don't know. It's getting scary out there, man. These AI stuff and
AI's
chatbots and, you know, they can imitate people. Like it's really, really scary. Be careful on your phones, people. In all seriousness. D Will, not very serious, very hilarious. Okay, NFL rule changes. That's what we're talking about right now. There has been multiple rule changes proposed for the NFL. Of course, they discussed these throughout the course of their league meetings. Some of those are coming up. And so there are 3 big ones. We're going to talk about at least the first 2. The first one is NFL owners are going to consider a proposal that was put forth by the Lions to modify the league's playoff seeding system to allow a wild card team with a better record to be seeded ahead of a division winner. This was proposed by the Detroit Lions. If you'll remember last year, were the number 1 overall seed in the NFC. Remember, who did they wind up playing coming out of their bye, Anthony? I can't remember.
They played the Commanders.
They sure did. And refresh my memory on what happened in that game.
Oh, the Commanders put belt to butt.
They sure did. As Jared Goff put football to Quan Martin's hands, and a whole bunch of stuff happened. Reverse pass, whoopsie daisies. Mike Sanders still with the pick. Good times. So the thing is about the Commanders is they were a 12-win team. Had the seedings last year gone in record order, the Lions would have been the 1 seed, the Eagles would have been the 2, as they were. The Commanders, based off the fact that they finished 12-5, would have been the 4 seed. The Vikings, who wound up as the 5th seed, would have been the 3 seed. And thus, after wild card weekend, the thing is, the Lions would have still gotten. Well, I guess no, because the Rams were the 4 seed, right? They were sitting there at 10-7. They won the 4-5 game, so they beat Minnesota. So the Rams would have wound up playing the Lions as the lowest remaining seed, as opposed to the Commanders, who won as a 6 seed over Tampa, being the team that played Detroit. So that's how that would have affected them last year. And frankly, I'm fine with this. Like, I understand why divisions exist, both for just ease of scheduling, and then I understand why the division winner should make the playoffs, right? The simple argument would be that you would take a group of teams that play basically identical schedules, right? Because we know that the NFC East will play another division, and all the teams, the Commanders, the Cowboys, the Giants, the Eagles, they're going to play all the teams in that other division of an NFC division and an AFC division, and then there's a couple of wild card games within their schedule based off of where they finished the previous season. But generally speaking, you've played a similar schedule, unlike the chaos of ranking college teams, which is subjective because everyone's playing a totally different schedule. But if you come out of that mostly sameness with the best record, I think you should deserve a playoff spot. I think that's perfectly fine. I don't think you need to say, like, oh, let's just do the best teams by record, period. I'm fine with keeping a division winner gets a playoff spot. But if you win a crap division, Houston Texans last year, winning the AFC South with not even getting to double-digit wins, like the Commanders did under Rivera the year they won the NFC East. Why are they hosting a playoff game at 7-9? Like, that's ridiculous. The Commanders won 12 games last year, and they were on the road at 10-win Tampa. I'm fine with switching that. That's perfectly fine with me.
Yeah, I'm okay with it as well. And the fact that you just brought up, the Commanders were 12-5, we would have been 4 in the division. I mean, in the conference, we would have had a home playoff game. And
yeah,
that what that would have did for the city as a whole, because of like where we've come from and what we had to pull ourselves out of, to turn around the franchise. I think that would have been huge for the city. But yeah, in terms of like just records, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, it would have changed the AFC as well. The Chargers were the 5th seed as a wild card at 11-6. Then they lost at Houston, who was 10-7, winning the South last year. So yeah, I'm good with that one. The other big one, there's 2 other ones. The Eagles made a proposal to align the postseason and regular season overtime rules. I'm fine with it the way they are. Like, I get each game is really super duper important, but you just don't need longer games in the regular season. Yes, in the playoffs, I want each team to have a possession no matter what. If you can't get a stop defensively in a regular season game and you can't separate yourselves after 60 minutes of football, I'm fine with, yes, I don't want the field goal and the coin flip. Honestly, I'd be fine with college overtime rules. I actually don't think that's like the silliest idea, even though it does feel silly at times. But if you're going to play more football, defense is a part of football. You got to get a stop of at least holding a team to a field goal in the regular season. Do you disagree, or are you team touchdown?
No, I'm more for player safety. I agree with you. I don't think games need to be longer in the regular season, because who's to say a team doesn't go to 3-4 straight overtime games? Like, that's a lot on the body.
Yeah.
Playing 5 additional quarters, and then sometimes you end up getting down to like 2-3 minutes left in the 5th quarter. So like, essentially, it's just too much football.
I've always thought the other way to do it is just like play a half a quarter. If you want to play full time 7.5, because that's the other thing is it takes the timing element out. Let's play a 7.5 minute overtime no matter what. Yeah. It's a half a quarter, and if whoever has more points at the end wins, and if the team that gets the ball first goes on a 7.5 minute drive and kicks a game-winning field goal, that's on you as a defense. You can't get driven on like that. You can't let them milk that clock against you like that. That's just is what it is. But then you time cap it, and 2-minute drive at the end of the game, you could still have that, right? Because you never get that sense of urgency rarely at the end of an overtime, because you're really fighting score, not clock. So that would be my alternate rule in Craig's goofy overtime fantasy land. But that's one of them. Then the other one, which we'll talk about a little bit more later, because Eric Edholm is actually going to join us next talking NFL draft from NFL.com. But it's about, the Packers are making the player safety and pace of play article or argument on the tush push. Those are the wrong arguments to make. JP actually was talking about this a little bit earlier today on social media. Just ban pushing players from behind like it used to be. This play used to be illegal because you used to not be able to push people, and now you can. So that would be the way to change it. Make a football argument, but also then like when you get these big giant scrums, I don't know. I got to think more about the tush push thing. All right, when we get back though, Eric Edholm is going to join us, and we're going to talk NFL draft now that free agency has more or less come to a close. It's the Hoffman Show. We are live on the Team 980. We are always live as well on the free Odyssey app, and we're streaming on YouTube at the Team 980. I don't know how many shows will ever give you the NFL draft, the NBA draft, and the WNBA draft all in one day, but we are doing that. It's draft day here on the show. It just kind of that's what the news is. And to get us started talking NFL draft, it's our pleasure to welcome back to the show our guy, Eric Edholm, lead draft writer for NFL.com. Double E, how we doing, man?
Yeah, just don't ask me about any hoops prospects. I'll be all right, man.
No, I know that I'm good. I know you're a Mizzou guy. Your team's in the tournament. I'm a Syracuse guy. Mine's not. So we're just going to avoid the hoops. We're just going to stick with football because suddenly that's the sport my school's better at. But I don't want to really talk about that either. We could do a Kyle McCord bit, but we won't.
Sure.
I actually do want to ask you about a quarterback real quick, though, that I just thought this is interesting, and it's kind of the news or one of the news items of the day in Draftland. Jalen Milroe just ran a 4.37, I saw at his pro day.
Yeah.
Why in the world did he not do that at the combine and become the talk of Indy for a week?
Yeah. Apparently he was on the fence up until the final kind of, decision day, if you will. I mean, it was when he met with a lot of teams at the combine. He was one of the more popular quarterback interviews for that combine setting, and I'm sure he'll have, team visits because he's a big question mark, right? There's a lot to like about his physical tools. There's a lot to question about his game. I saw him down at the Senior Bowl. I don't think he separated himself. So, yeah, I was thinking going into the combine. In fact, I even included him in my 17 candidates for the fastest 40-yard dash. And, of course, I always pick extra because guys bow out and stuff. But I think he's my first quarterback in the last 3 years of doing it. So, you saw it today. He's fast, not just fast, but fast. And I was a little surprised he didn't run an Indy. Maybe he didn't feel like he had enough kind of training for it or, just sort of general healing from the season or whatever. But he opted out, and maybe we'll see. I'm sure there's still going to be buzz from this, though.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll keep an eye on that. But luckily, Eric, this year, that's the last quarterback question on a DC radio show. We got that all straightened out last year. I know you've only done one mock draft so far that's up on NFL.com. I'm sure you got your 2.0 coming around the corner. You had James Pierce going to Washington. Generally speaking, when you look at this edge rusher class, because now, like, looking what Washington did in free agency, that seems like their number one need if it wasn't already going in. But with Tunsil, showing up, like, tackle is now down the list a little bit. How confident are you that this edge class will fall in a way that there is a player worthy of them taking at that position at 29?
Yeah, I think it's the one position where you feel like, if you'd asked me what some of the stronger positions in this draft class were, I'd mention tight end, I'd mention running back for sure, and I definitely mention, the defensive line class as a whole, but specifically edge. And I think, given the value of those two other positions, running back and tight end, where, we'll see some first rounders here and there, but people are generally a little bit more suspicious about using higher picks at those positions. You're left with edge, which is the premium position, right? It's probably quarterback, receiver, edge, offensive tackle. Those are sort of the money positions that more often than not go first round, even in down years for the position. So there is a high value there, obviously. But I think there's a little bit of volatility with some guys. And Pierce is one of them. He had some character questions, some sort of football character stuff that we haven't always seen him play with a hot motor. And so there's, you don't exactly know who's got him on their board and who doesn't, and who's worried about that and who isn't. Same with Mike Green, who spent some time at Virginia and left there in maybe a little bit of controversial fashion. And even though he's sort of vehemently denied the allegations against him, I think teams have done work on him. And then like Shamar Stewart, even the workout warrior from A&M. I mean, these are all three players that have great alluring traits, but also some big question marks. So I think that kind of keeps alive the possibility of a real legitimate first round talent being there when the Commanders pick or, within close range of it.
So that becomes really interesting to me, listening to how Adam Peters talks about things, how Dan Quinn talks about things, because they talk about that Commander's tag. And if I hear something like, he doesn't play hard every snap, or there's a little bit of a question about the motor,
right,
that feels like that guy's off their board. That's just not how they roll, how they operate. So if we were to just for the sake of argument, for the sake of discussion, not really the sake of argument, for the sake of discussion, take anybody off the board who there is a motor, like football character question. Who are the edge guys that are then left in that range? I know a guy like Landon Jackson probably comes up, who was just an absolute freak show at the combine, plays really hard. Who else could possibly be available in that range? Or maybe if they trade back somewhere into the 30s, low 40s could be available.
Yeah, I mean, Jackson's sort of that borderline first, second round guy, and, certainly looks the part. I mean, I think he would be almost like a Greg Rousseau-ish kind of build, that sort of long, leggy, strong guy. Had a scary neck injury at the last regular season game of the year and got carted off. He's fine. It was just one of those things that you worried about at the time because there was some first-round buzz at the end of the season. It was interesting with him, too, because he didn't really show out day one of the Senior Bowl to me. I thought he actually had a rough practice, but it said something to me that he really bounced back the next 2 days. And I know there's a lot of weight put on that first practice sometimes, and, not everybody stays for the entire week and all that. But, that to me is the guy who said, okay, I got to raise my game here and did so. And the testing in Indy was the sort of the icing on the cake, if you will. So, yeah, I mean, he's just one of a number of guys. I mean, the Ohio State edges are definitely gonna play full tilt. Tuamalo and Jack Sawyer are both kind of high energy guys, both NFL physiques, well built for the trench duty. In battling in the muck up front, but also I think have enough juice. They're not really true edge benders, but guys who can hold up outside. So if you're looking for more of the zippy, bendy pass rusher, I think he's probably gone by the time they pick. But Donovan Ezraku from Boston College is the one who is probably, along with Mike Green, I would say made the most of their draft stock in the last 6 months, just in terms of the edge rush class. He's more of your smaller, longer, leggier pass rusher, kind of that Will McDonald mold a little bit.
Yeah, Ezraku's a guy that was being mocked to Washington basically until like the end of January. And then everyone's like, nope, never mind.
Point, yeah.
Never mind. Eric Edholm with us, lead NFL draft writer for NFL.com. The other position that I think is really interesting for Washington at 29 is corner. It seems like every mock draft simulation that I do, every actual mock draft that I look at, like there's a lot of corners that are going to go kind of right after that. And if they decide, no, these guys are all tiered for us the same, that's certainly a position they could attack based off of their current roster. Is there a guy in that range that you particularly like?
Yeah, I mean, I'm maybe a little higher on Maxwell Hairston from Kentucky than some other people are. I don't know. It's hard. I haven't really sort of caught up on everybody's list, but, he missed some time this season with injury. Didn't really, I don't know. It didn't really have an opportunity at the Senior Bowl to show out. And so, obviously running a 4.28 will get attention. And that was kind of the time I think he was hoping for and needed to run, just because you're not talking about a super thickly built corner. I mean, he's on the lighter side, 180 pounds and just below 6 foot. So that said, I think he can play on the outside. I think he can be very good. He's in that range, I think, somewhere in that 25 to 35 range, if I had to guess, maybe a little longer, but corners go fast. I would say the kid from FSU, Thomas, is a different type of build, longer, stronger. Certainly would make a lot of sense if he was there. For a bad football team, I saw some pretty good tape on this guy, and he was a day one show out in Mobile too. So those are a couple that I like, different styles. Jahdae Barron, there's been more buzz on him. I would say he might be off the board at that point. And then in round 2, you start getting in a little bit of murky area. Some of the injured guys like Siobhan Revelle from ECU and, Benjamin Morrison. And, there's a potential first-round talents that you could get later on. But, obviously it comes with a little bit of a buyer beware tag, I would say.
I got a couple more questions real quick for Eric Edholm here on the NFL Draft with us here on the Hoffman Show. The first one, Eric, is when you've watched free agency happen and some teams fill some needs, and you're obviously in the background working on your mock draft 2.0, presumably. What's kind of the biggest contour change of this draft, whether it's a team that filled a quarterback need or a big tackle need or whatever. Like, what is some of the changes that you've seen from mock draft 1.0 pre-free agency to kind of what you're working on now with 2.0 presumably coming out soon with team needs evolving?
Yeah, next week we'll have I think I've gotten through about 3 picks so far because I keep kind of wavering on the top. I think we have learned a few things, but we're, Aaron Rodgers kind of making us wait a little bit. Obviously, that affects some of the teams picking near the top. And, where's Russell Wilson going to land? Does that affect a team's draft plans if they're just totally not enamored with the quarterback? So, but, you just sort of look at the Titans at 1 and just figure, they haven't been real aggressive at quarterback. It just sort of feels like they can sit there at 1, take Cam Ward, wipe their hands and say, all right, we got our guy. Is he as good as Callahan had with Burrow at number 1 a few years back? No, I don't think so. I think he's a good football player. I really do. And I think he could end up being approaching a top 10 quarterback. I just don't know if he's ever going to be special. So, I think that's becoming a little more crystallized, but that also could be a way to lure the Giants up. But I think Ward going 1 feels more likely now than it ever has. And then you have to ask yourself, how to 2, 3, 4 line up. And, the draft is still really murky. We have kind of a couple of really unusual guys like Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter, true blue chip guys. You have Austin Jenney, one of the better backs we've seen in recent years. But we don't have that one true alpha receiver. We don't have the clear number 1 at left tackle. It's kind of defense heavy. There's just a lot of, 2 tight ends who could go in the top 15. It's a very unusual year in a lot of ways. So, which I like, and it makes it harder to predict and harder to kind of feel out. So, yeah, I'm going to be slogging along these next 3 days on the mock trying to, make it all make sense, or at least something close to it.
And then on day 4, Russell Wilson will sign and throw your whole thing in the garbage can again.
That happens every year, man. There was a trade a couple years ago. Like, I was 10 minutes away from filing, and it was like, first-round pick traded. And, yeah,
by the way, also,
it was the end of my laptop at that point, yeah.
This is the first year you might know the stat, so I'll just start saying it and you can finish my sentence if you want. It's that every single team has their own first round pick. It's like over a decade at least, if not longer.
Yeah, no, it's been a long time. I forget the year, but yeah, it's been a long time since we've had that. So yeah, I mean, just a very unusual thing, and we don't have any first rounders traded next year yet. No big quarterback moves or anything, or Myles Garrett didn't switch teams. So I don't know. Does that mean there's a calm before the storm? We're going to get a lot of activity? Maybe. Teams like Washington and Minnesota don't have a lot of draft capital, especially Washington, 5 this year, 5 next. So, that trade down scenario you were floating, I could see that too.
All right, for sure. All right, last thing for you real quick. Speaking of Washington, obviously much of local interest here being a local radio show. The Commanders were so unexpectedly good last year. I basically asked everyone who came through at the Combine this question, so I'm going to wrap up with you on this thought.
Yeah.
The Commanders were so unexpectedly good, and they were a very interesting exercise in team building that I think it made a lot of people, certainly me, but I'm local. I did this. I talked about them every day nonstop for, since the day that Adam Peters was hired. So I thought about team building very differently after covering last year's team. You have a much wider scope of the league. You've been doing this a long time. Was there something, though, that you took out of what Washington did, the way they built it, that informs the way you're thinking about the offseason and team building this year and more or less going forward?
Yeah, obviously, you kind of start with the quarterback position with any time a GM takes over a job and, where are they at? What's the level of urgency for that? It was high, obviously, but they were in position to get one. They knew it. They went through the process. That was like one channel. The other channel was, I think, just filling out the roster with as many competitive, roster situations as you could, filling out talent. Like, we don't need everybody to be a hero this year, right? I was a big fan of Ben Sinnott. I thought he was a really good college tight end who's going to make a good NFL player. We didn't see a lot from him, right? And that was a good, nice to have that kind of luxury. But just going through and finding some of those second contract guys who, like Jeremy Chin and Frankie Louvu and stuff who were, a little bit slipped through the cracks. talented players you can kind of get in there and make work. And obviously it was kind of the Wagner move was obviously a sort of a crystallizing move up front, and just throw as many one-year veterans into competitive situations with rookies. And it was a smart team-building exercise. And, Adam had such a good reputation for years. We kind of heard about him and a few others the last few years. And, he got his opportunity, and I think he made the most of it year one. This year's been different, right? Obviously, aggressive moves on offense, and it just shows that, you don't have to necessarily have the same philosophy every single year. Situations change. They win. Now you're in a different mode. You're gearing up to make a big run, and that's why you saw Tunsil and Deebo.
I think that's a great point you just made at the end, too. Like, things change. Your cap situation changes. The league market changes. Your urgency to win. Your quarterback situation. So, I think a lot of people are always looking for the perfect process every single time, and that doesn't really exist. Eric Edholm, lead writer for NFL.com when it comes to the NFL draft. Again, it's new mock draft 2.0 coming next week. Eric, always a pleasure, sir. Really appreciate the time. I know you're busy this time of year and slammed always with the kiddos and everything else you got going on. So hope everyone's feeling better in the Edholm household, and we'll talk to you again before the draft for sure.
Thanks, buddy. I appreciate it. Talk to you soon.
Eric Edholm with us here on the Hoffman Show. Coming up at 5 p.m., NBA draft. Jeremy Woo, ESPN.com. The Jazz and Wizards are playing tonight. They're both not very good in 2025, but that's because they want to be really good in the 2025 NBA draft. We'll talk about the non-Cooper flag prospects that we should be watching and the two Rutgers kids that aren't in the NCAA tournament with Woo coming up at 5 here on the Hoffman Show. Anthony, I just found something that we're gonna have to revisit later in the show. Also, I feel like you and your camera have moved 78 times. You went from like you were shrunk down in the corner on the left of the screen to now you look like a giant.
Really?
Yeah. And now I look like a small person.
I did move my camera. So all my cameras are now on this monitor as opposed to this one because when you're on StreamYard, I usually look at this one.
And now
so
I
it looks
just
like
need to-
I'm not looking at you.
No, I like this placement, but now I just refocused it on the screen, so now you're where you're supposed to be.
Am I still on the left?
You're still on the left.
Okay.
Yeah. No. It looks much better now. But apparently, remember the segment we did with Linnell last week? About Connor Orr's ridiculous thoughts on the Commanders?
Yep.
In his column from when is this from? I don't use Twitter very much anymore. And every once in a while I pop back on just to like check news or try to find a link to a story. And I'll like click over to my mentions real quick just to see who's still talking to me. Someone, I guess our little segment made it back to Connor Orr.
Ooh.
And he wrote about it in his column 5 days ago. He goes, let's talk about the Commanders in a little more detail. Shockingly, a truncated clip of something I said generated some frustration in a local market that assumes I either hate the franchise, haven't examined it thoroughly enough, or that I'm baiting people into getting upset. I can assure you that all three of these assertions are 100% true. Kidding. Which is a funny bit. I need to read his response, but we'll get back into this in the next hour.
Okay.
Connor Orr, it's war. It just works out that rhymed. I would have said that if his name was Jack Smith. Or I shouldn't use Jack Smith. He's one of the that's a political. I was thinking of a generic name, but he's someone who's a person in politics. Give me a random name, Anthony. My brain's
Jeremy Woo.
He's an ESPN or ESPN NBA draft analyst, and Jeremy Woo is going to join us next. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We're streaming live on YouTube, too, at the Team 980. And the Wizards and Jazz are playing tonight, as you will hear here on the Team 980. Dave Johnson will join us 6 o'clock because it's game day, the whole deal. You know the deal. They're playing the Jazz, who have now passed them in the race to the bottom. Wizards and Jazz for NBA inferiority, but superiority when it comes to draft position. And that means today's top story is the NBA draft. And thus, it is time for Not My Beat.
Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not My Beat.
Jeremy Woo is an NBA draft analyst for ESPN.com. And with March Madness starting tomorrow, plus the big game tonight, we wanted to get a little bit more info on this NBA draft. So, Jeremy, really appreciate you joining us and spending some time.
Yeah, what's going on? Fun time of year, always.
Yeah, no, it's a good time, and especially I think for Wizards fans that have kind of been waiting for this. Like, okay, let's see what we got here. Hopefully, this is the nadir, this is the bottom, and they'll, if they can win this draft lottery, great. We know they would take Cooper Flagg because Cooper Flagg is the best player in this draft. So I actually don't want to talk about Cooper Flagg because I think everyone more or less understands that he's the guy, and we've all known that since he was awesome on the USA Select team as a 17-year-old a year ago. If there was any doubt, even then. So when you look at the best players in terms of NBA draft prospects that will play in March Madness, who is the next highest guy on your board? Is it Edholm from Baylor? Or is it somebody else?
Yeah, for our list, it's Edholm, BJ Edholm from Baylor. We have Trey Johnson from Texas, who will play tonight in the first four. And then, the other Duke guys come in right after him. Obviously Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey and Rutgers will miss the tournament. So, you won't see them play this week. But also I give you props because I think you're the first person who's been like, let's not talk about Cooper Flagg.
I mean, he's awesome. Like, what are we going to say? He's the best player in the draft. They win the lottery. They're taking Flagg. If they win the lottery, we can talk about him then. I got plenty of time to talk about Cooper Flagg. But, and there's nothing that, if he goes out and has a bad tournament, that's not going to change. People are like, oh, he rolled his ankle. Like, okay, fine. We'll see you in the NBA when you're the number one pick. So let me ask you this then. This is, I guess, a Flagg-adjacent question, but just trying to understand some of those names you just said, the two Rutgers kids that aren't in the tournament. Like, what's the contour of this draft is the word I will use. Flagg's the number one guy. He's a number one pick in any year that's not Wembanyama, LeBron, like the elitist of the elite. He's a bona fide number one guy. For these next 4, 5, 6 guys, how deep is your next tier, and how good are those guys relative to other years?
Well, I think that's what people are, and what we've been trying to figure out is sort of like, to your point, like how steep is the drop off? I think from talking to people around the NBA, I think Dylan Harper probably is like the soft consensus number 2. I think his skill set as a bigger ball handler, very strong, good feel. I think he kind of feels a little bit safer at number 2 than some of the other guys. Now, you might talk to someone who really, really believes in Harper's upside. You might talk to someone who views him as more of like a safe pick at number 2. But I think, the fact that both those conversations are happening kind of points to why he's a cut above. And then you've got, I think the next group, Ace Bailey, his upside is huge. Big time shot maker, but still really learning the game. I think still very raw in a lot of ways that teams are trying to parse in terms of projecting him out. Edholm is kind of the same, right? Those two guys are, Bailey and Edholm probably have, top 5 upside. I think you could argue their upside is higher than anyone else that you would find lower than them on the board. But then the question is, how likely is it that they reach that? What is the best team fit situation for those guys to tap into that upside, right? So it's, you go from Flagg to Harper, and then you've got the next group, which I think is those two guys. And, you could argue, come on, Malawatch or Trey Johnson or whoever, in terms of who you view as like the third pick. But it kind of just depends on your risk tolerance and how much you love the upside of guys like Bailey and Edholm.
So that's been one of the kind of the, I would say, overwhelming questions that we've been tackling here in DC, and we've talked to some of the folks that cover the Wizards about this. I remember distinctly talking about it with Josh Robbins from The Athletic, where he's like, look, of course they want to develop good habits, they want to be competitive, but they need to lose. They need to have the worst record in the league because a lot of folks think this is a 5-player draft, And as long as even if you lose out on all 4 lottery spots, the worst you can be if you have the worst record is the 5th pick. Do you see that cutoff there at 5? Do you think it's 6? Or like if the Wizards were to not get a top 3 pick, is that like an absolute catastrophe based off of the talent drop off here?
Yeah, I mean, I look at it as, I mean, I think it becomes a tricky draft at 3, just because of what I just said. It kind of depends on how you weight that stuff. It's going to be a ton of background, a ton of stuff that it's hard to say, from our position at this stage. But I do think like I think 3 and 4 at least you'll get someone, assuming it's one of those 2, with pretty good upside. But again, I think the other point to what you just said about what Josh said, shout out to Josh, is that next year's draft looks very strong at the top. So if you are a team like Washington that does seem to be in a patient position, maybe there's a little bit less downside to taking someone who, obviously you want to hit on one of the top guys, but if you have to swing at 3 or 4 on the upside of someone like Bailey or Edholm, like knowing that you might not be that much better next year, like at least they have, and there are other teams in that same boat where at least you can like develop a guy for a year, and then next year you're looking at AJ Dybonsa or Cam Boozer or Darren Peterson, like those 3 guys. We have Nate Ament in that conversation as well. So like, those 4 guys, interesting, very high upside, going to be an interesting thing to watch unfold between now and next year too. But for some of these teams, when you're planning long term, it's like, well, at least we'll, if we don't get the guy we want this year, there are guys next year who are also high caliber prospects that you can start thinking about. So again, that's not necessarily the answer you want if you're a fan of a tanking team, but that's kind of the reality of the lottery wheel.
Sure. And of course, the answer you want is we won. We have Cooper Flag. That's, again, well established. Jeremy Woo, ESPN NBA draft analyst, with us here on the Hoffman Show. So the 2 Rutgers kids, Ace Bailey, Dylan Harper, they have 2 potentially top 3 picks, certainly 2 top 5 picks. They didn't make the NCAA tournament. Is that concerning at all?
Yeah, so I wrote a story on this last week or the week before. It's on ESPN.com, basically kind of asking that question to scouts, kind of digging into, how the NBA views it. And I think it's very case by case, right? Like teams are going to look at every situation contextually. I think the prevailing thing I heard with Rutgers is just that people around the league felt that the supporting talent on their roster was not good enough to really place too much blame on a team where you have 2 teenagers using the vast majority of the possessions and not much other consistent options. On the other hand, I think people do prefer to see a winning resume. Like, this year, based on what we just talked about, like it may not and it should not probably hurt them too much in terms of where they are drafted. But you do ask those overhead questions. Like, scouts want to see guys be part of successful frameworks, and then again, you can make the argument, well, at least guys like Trey Johnson from Texas or like Jeremiah Fears at Oklahoma, those guys were in similar positions, also very young, using a ton of possessions on their teams, and those teams did make the tournament. So, again, Rutgers in the Big Ten, very tough league. Wasn't a season that went their way. But I think it just kind of depends how you talk to. For me, it's kind of here and there. Like, obviously, it'd be better if they made the tournament, but it's not like a catch-all criteria where it like makes or disqualifies someone as a very good prospect.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Derek Queen's another interesting guy that has a lot of interest here locally, obviously being a Maryland kid. What do you make of him and his prospects in the league and how much he could help them with a good tournament run here?
Yeah, I've been very impressed with what Derek has done. I can't say I expected him to be, just based off seeing him in high school, as impactful as he has been for Maryland. Definitely one of the best freshmen in the country. I think the skill set, I think we've all seen, is very real. There are still concerns, I think, long-term that teams have, and it's going to be sort of eye of the beholder that will sort of determine. I think he does have kind of a wide range, just because of the defensive projection, where he's not like a quick defender. He's not really a rim protector in an NBA sense, where he's covering a ton of ground and challenging shots. And I had a lot of scouts sort of just griped to me privately just about his motor being inconsistent, like taking plays off defensively, and guys grow out of that. I think there's still a lot more good than bad to take away from for his season, and I've been very impressed with what Maryland's been able to do.
Last question for Jeremy Woo of ESPN, one of their NBA draft analysts. Wizards have another pick late in the first round, 25. Like last year, they got Keshawn George, and that turned out to be a steal because most guys that you draft at 25, like they're not that good. He's pretty good as a rookie. Is there anybody that you like in that range late that you like a lot more than maybe some of the other mock drafters or some of the other boards that you're seeing, or that you're maybe hearing some rumblings from scouts that like, hey, watch out for this guy at the end of the first round?
Well, I would say two things. Like, first of all, I think that's sort of an interesting range right now just because of a lot of people around the NBA are anticipating just with NIL payments being much stronger and a much better financial alternative now if you're a fringe first rounder. Like those late first round picks, I mean, you might see, teams might see 20 to 40 guys off their top 100 or where many guys you rank. Like you're going to see guys go back to school, and it's going to thin out the pool. So like, I can throw someone out there, and it may not be in the draft. I will say a guy who I think is playing well right now and is underrated, and I doubt he kind of makes it to 25, but is Will Riley from Illinois. I was at the Big Ten tournament. He's playing good basketball. He's very young. I think Jonathan Gavoni and I have been high on him. I think higher probably than some others, but I'm a believer in his talent, and I think not dissimilar from Keyshawn in some ways in terms of just needing to get stronger, great positional size, very different players, but just in terms of like a project pick. So I think teams are probably a little higher on him than they might want to let on, and I could see him going probably, mid first round. But I think we have a lot to play out in terms of the pre-draft process and which guys end up ultimately staying in the draft. So that's a big question, I think, for us trying to do this work as well.
Yeah, for sure. And then we all know that Will might package some of his 78 second-round picks, try to move up a couple spots. We know that it's going to be chaos on draft night. Jeremy Woo, ESPN NBA draft analyst. You can read his and Jonathan Gavoni's work on ESPN.com. Jeremy, this was great, man. Really appreciate it. Thanks for some time.
Of course, no worries. Thank you.
All right, that's Jeremy Woo. When we get back, let's run through a similar exercise on the women's side of things. Ben Pickman from The Athletic covers women's hoops for them, college and W. So let's take our first look really in earnest on the show at the women's NCAA tournament bracket, and we can highlight along the way some players that the Mystics will be looking at with their not one, not two, but three top 6 picks in next month's WNBA draft. Ben Pickman with us next. the Hoffman Show. We are on the Team 980. We are always live on the free Odyssey app, and we are streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. We just talked about some of the top prospects in the men's NCAA tournament that we're keeping an eye on as the Wizards and Jazz play tonight. Race to the bottom of the NBA. The Mystics, we already know, have 3 of the top 6 picks in the WNBA draft, and we haven't really had a chance to talk too much about the women's bracket over the last couple of days since it came out. Tournament starts a little bit later as well, but since we don't have a show tomorrow or Friday, we're now out of time, and it's time to do all of that at once. To help us do that, Ben Pickman joins us from The Athletic. Ben, great to catch up again. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Hopefully we can crash course this in whatever time we have.
Yeah, we can certainly do our best here. And so if we look at it just quickly, like overarching, we can get into the bracket and some of the matchups and some of the favorites and all that in a second. But when you look at the draft this year and this college pool that we're going to be watching over the next couple of weeks through a WNBA lens, how deep is this group? Like, we know Paige Beckers is the belle of the ball at the top in the same way that Cooper Flagg is the belle of the ball in the men's field, although there's probably a little bit more contention on that than Flagg, who's universally seen as the number one guy on the men's side. But after Beckers, how deep is this draft where the Mystics have these 3 picks in the top 6?
Yeah, there are a lot of potential players in this draft who could be really, really solid WNBA players, right? You go down the list, Kirky Iriafen, Sonia Citron, Sanaya Rivers. These are really, really good athletes. Olivia Miles protected a top 3 lottery pick as well. Frankly, the player who has the biggest star power potential, who could be a franchise player, is not someone in this NCAA tournament. It is Dominique Malonga, who is this 19-year-old center who plays in France. She's 6'6". She could dunk when she was like 14, 15 years old. She's been playing pro for a few years on the French national team at the Olympics. She's the kind of athlete that, frankly, you don't see very often in the WNBA. And so when you talk to executives, like, again, she's not in this NCAA tournament, so that doesn't really help in this preview, but she is the kind of player that if she is available at number 3, I would be pretty surprised if Washington passed her up, because she really does have the potential. I know Beckers is kind of the big name here in America, the big name that everybody knows, but it's not crazy to think that in 5 years, 10 years' time, if developed the right way, Dominique Malonga is actually the best prospect looking back at this 2025 WNBA draft.
That is very interesting, but also not surprising, I think, for those of us that have been a little locked in on this. I remember actually, ironically now, Ben, the first person to mention her to me was Mike Thibault. We were sitting down after an interview last year. He's like, yeah, there's this French kid over there that's 6'6", and she's awesome. And I was like, oh, check it out. And here we are a year later, and we'll see if Washington can ultimately draft her at 3. I do think, if we try to now start to talk about some of the tournament as well, is Notre Dame the most dangerous 3 seed that we've seen in the women's tournament going in a while, considering they have 4, 5, 6 maybe future WNBA players on that roster, and yet somehow are a 3 seed?
Yeah, I mean, they're a 3 seed because they lost 3 of their last 5 games and really backed into this 2025 NCAA tournament. But I think your point that you make is a really good one, because they did win 19 straight games at one point during this regular season. They had ascended to the number 1 team in the AP poll. They do have, potentially 2 or 3 of, WNBA level prospects, including 2 players who could go in the top 5, and it wouldn't be shocking, in Miles and Sonia Citron. They really are that deep. They really are that talented. Niele Ivey is one of the best coaches in the country. And so, yeah, they are super, super dangerous. I have them, in my kind of circle, I'll call it circle of 6, teams that I think have a legitimate chance to win the national championship. But they have a tough stretch. They have a tough path as a 3 seed, and it's one of those teams do you want to bet on a team figuring it out in March, flipping the switch, or maybe something is up and maybe their season is kind of going to end on a whimper, much like their ECC tournament run did, much like their conference regular season did too.
Ben Pickman of The Athletic with us here on the Hoffman Show. Obviously, also, or actually, it's not in their conference. God, my old Big East brain turned back on for a second. That thing's been dead for a while. UConn is who I was going to ask about, who's still in the Big East. Obviously, sure. Notre Dame no longer in the Big East. Do you think the committee got it right putting them as a 2 seed with the 4 ones that they had, or was that a mistake by the committee?
No, I think it was a fair seed. I mean, people looked at kind of UConn's conference record and The Big East, frankly, is not as good as some of the other power conferences, not really considered as much like a power conference as, the ACC or the SEC or the Big Ten. So that helps to explain the seeding, and it wasn't really surprising to see UConn as a 2. I think the frustration people saw on Sunday night when the bracket was announced was more from USC coach Lindsey Gottlieb, who seemed to be a little bit peeved that they were the fourth number 1 seed in the committee's eyes, which meant they had to play UConn. And I think we might have seen a similar reaction from Texas coach Nick Schaefer had they been paired in the same bracket as UConn. But overall, I don't really think UConn cares where they're seated, whether they were that number 1 seed or a top number 2, because they recognize that to win the national championship, to go to a Final Four, you got to beat who's in front of you, and you got to beat everyone, right? And this UConn team, their win over South Carolina in February, for my money, it's the best win that any team had during this regular season. Going to Columbia, South Carolina, blowing out the defending champions on their home court in a game that really was never competitive. So UConn, to me, the ceiling is there. They have, I think, the highest ceiling of frankly, any team. Their best might be better than anyone else's best. And they did show that against South Carolina. And it's just a matter of, can they get to that level again, when the field of 68 begins later this week.
Another 2 seed that's pretty interesting to me is TCU. Obviously, a lot of fans who check in just in March every single year. We know more fans checked in on games this year than any other year prior. ESPN put out that press release a couple weeks ago that's like, yeah, we had more games of 500,000 viewers than any other year ever this season. But for a lot of folks that just check in to March every year on the tournaments, the last time they saw Haley Van Lith was Caitlin Clark cooking her when she was wearing an LSU uniform. Well, update, she's now with TCU. She's a Big 12 Player of the Year. How good is that TCU team, and do they have a chance? Is that one of the first teams that's outside of that circle of 6 you talked about, or are they in it for you as a potential true title contender?
No, I think they're outside the circle of 6. I mean, this has already been the best year in the history of TCU women's basketball. They're number 2 in the region. They've led at halftime in 24 straight games, and in an NCAA best 31 games this year. They've already won a school record 31 games this year. Haley Van Lith, you mentioned her, Big 12 Player of the Year, and Sedona Prince is kind of the center, her front court partner from a pick and roll standpoint. They have great chemistry on the court together. It's a really good offense, not as good comparably as a defense. I just have a hard time seeing them go from a team that is just trying to ascend to finally being in the Final Four. I mean, they are one of the best stories kind of in the sport more broadly this year in this way that last year in the 2024 season, they actually needed to hold open tryouts at one point during the 23-24 season and literally had to take players who were just lay students going to normal classes and bring them onto the women's basketball team just to continue their season at one point in the winter because they were so decimated with injuries. A year later, they are winning the Big 12, both in the regular season and the conference tournament, and being a 2 seed. And so, it's crazy to think Mark Campbell's been there just a few years now. It's crazy to think where they were from where they were to where they are now. But I think Final Four is possible, though I'm not betting it. And I think national championship, you just don't often see the team that goes from out of the tournament, not really a power player, to suddenly winning, especially on the women's side.
For sure. The powers that be tend to power on. In South Carolina, they've been the most powerful program in the country for the better part of a decade now with Dawn. Last year was so surprising because it's like, oh, man, they missed their shot with Aaliyah Boston. This will be a down year. Then they went undefeated and won the national championship. This year, they're a 1 seed again. They had that nasty loss that you referenced earlier to UConn. How does this South Carolina team stack up? And what kind of form would you say that they're in going into this NCAA tournament?
They're in really, really good form. They blew out Texas. They know they're number 1 seed in that SEC tournament final, and that is the kind of statement win that you want as you head into the NCAA tournament play. I mean, look, this is another really, really good South Carolina team. They are top 5 in offensive rating. They're 15th in defense. They're 3rd overall in net rating. They don't really turn the ball over. They get out and run and score in transition. They're first in points in the paint. They are also really deep. Just like last year's team, there's not one player that you can key in on and say, if we shut them down, we are definitely going to win. They have a number of players, Mylasia Fulwiley, who is one of the best athletes in the tournament, a sophomore guard who's super exciting. Joyce Edwards, a freshman forward. She's one of the best freshmen in the country this year. Tahina Paopao, one of the best shooters in the country last year, still a very consistent shooter, someone you can't leave open. So they just have a lot of options, a lot of depth, a lot of options. They're obviously really well coached. They're obviously really experienced and prepared heading into this tournament. So it's not an undefeated team. They might not be attracting all the headlines like they did last year, but this is still a South Carolina team that it would not be shocking if they won a second consecutive championship.
So going full circle to wrap up, Ben, as Ben Pickman from The Athletic is with us here on the Hoffman Show. Who is the player that you think has from what you think they can do and what their team can do, who's the player that you think can help their draft stock the most over the next 3 weeks? You just mentioned a ton of names that I think are eligible candidates for me, from Sanaya Rivers to Pow Pow to a bunch of these different players. Who do you think can really help their WNBA draft stock in their final chance to do it before next month's draft?
Yeah, the player that I've kind of circled is AZ Fudd of UConn. Now, she could go back to college for another year if she so chooses, but she simply put has first-round talent. She is an elite shooter with a very pure stroke, very much in the kind of Steph Curry vein. She's also an Under Armour athlete, works out with Steph, has a good relationship with him, kind of this 3-and-D. But you could certainly see that, if she puts 6 incredible games together, then maybe she jumps to the WNBA and is not just a first-round pick like some people think and project she could be, but is a top half of the first-round pick. Again, an injury-riddled career in college so far. She's very close with Paige Beckers, so it wouldn't be shocking if AZ left because Paige is also expected to leave. And AZ played great against South Carolina. That was her best game of the year. And so if she's able to replicate it, she is certainly the kind of player who could see her name soar up draft boards and make the decision about whether to stay or whether to go. It could be a pretty simple one if she plays well and gets positive feedback as a result.
That would be the DMV's very own AZ Fudd, St. John's College High School, Arlington, Virginia. And Ben, I lied. I now have one more question because you got me thinking on the local tick, and I meant to ask you this earlier. What kind of chance do you give Maryland to make a run to Sweet 16, Elite 8 kind of range?
Yeah, I think it's definitely possible. I think Alabama, not an easy matchup by any means. Again, coming out of the SEC, which was a really, really strong conference this year. Cheyenne Sellers, obviously key to everything that Maryland has done this year. But the team, again, regrouped this offseason, one of the best teams in the Big Ten. Sellers, so much goes around what she can do. Another player potentially with some WNBA draft implications. For me, I expect them certainly as a host team to win that first-round game against Norfolk State. There's some people are saying that game is a little bit shakier than some people think. I think Alabama is actually a pretty tough test in the round of 32, but then I'm staring down, you're staring down the barrel here. They would have to play South Carolina theoretically in the Sweet 16. Right. And so for as good as, a season that Maryland has had, and they've had a pretty good one, certainly, I don't really foresee it going much longer than that if they even get that.
Ben Pickman, you can read him and the entire team of The Athletic's work on The Athletic. Their app is great, easy to use. You can also just go to theathletic.com. Ben, appreciate your time, sir, and I'm sure we will be talking over the next month over the course of this tournament and leading into that WNBA draft.
Happy to do it. Enjoy the tournament.
You as well, my friend. Ben Pickman with us here on the Hoffman Show, which, as we move things around, Anthony, means we have a half-hour hole in the program. No?
We have rule changes. Also, we have Connor Orr, who you said is a
rule. Yeah.
We have a couple of things because we didn't finish all the NFL rule changes.
Well, I was thinking, because we had talked about as a possibility today, doing a special edition of Never Read the Comments. But in a way, Connor Orr subtweeting us in his article is kind of a Never Read the Comments.
Hey, I'm with it.
We're gonna have some fun with someone who decided to subtweet us in a national publication next. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We're streaming live on YouTube, and we are, I'm trying to think of the right wording for this, Anthony. We're just like feeding a content cycle. It's like we're just eating ourselves here, is what we're about to do. Because Connor Orr said something on a podcast. Linnell brought it to me. We talked about it. Apparently, our response got back to Orr. Now he wrote about it, and now we're going to talk about what he wrote about.
That's fun.
It is the content cycle on display. So initially, what started this were comments by Connor Orr on the MMQB podcast, a podcast that he hosts with Albert Breer. They're smart guys, been around. I've listened it from time to time. It's not in my regular rotation, but I've heard clips and all that kind of stuff. Anthony, do you happen to remember what day that we did this with Linnell? What's today? Today's the 19th. I think it was.
It was on a Wednesday.
Yeah, so it was a week ago today. Here we go. This is the bite. Okay, this is what started it all. Admittedly, this is cut because we can't play their whole podcast. One, we don't have the time. Two, that's illegal because it's their podcast. If you want to go listen to their podcast, you can listen to their podcast. But I do not believe in listening to the fullness of the clip that we are taking this at all out of context.
I did not like Washington's free agency at all. I hate the idea of microwaving this process and just being like, oh, okay, we made it to the NFC title game. Let's get Deebo Samuel and Laramie Tunsil and let's trade away all of our picks for veteran guys and this, it's not 2010 anymore. Like, it doesn't necessarily work that way. And now you're putting a lot on Jaden Daniels' plate. And for everybody that's telling me, well, you have to strike while the iron's hot. Yeah. That's what the Jets said with Mark Sanchez. That's what the Texans said with CJ Stroud. That's what all these teams, that's what the Eagles said with Carson Wentz. And it ended up just overloading these guys. And then they were never the same.
I thought that was incredibly stupid for a million reasons. We talked about it. And then I was in my Twitter mentions, which is a place I don't go very often because I literally don't use Twitter for anything but trying to find links and all that kind of stuff. And I see that someone had responded to an article that Orr wrote earlier in the week and tagged me saying, hey, I see you responding to Craig. I think the answer is to try to grow this roster a little more organically, blah, blah, blah. And so I clicked on the article, and here's what Orr wrote about the Commanders. Let's talk about the Commanders in a little more detail. Shockingly, a truncated clip of something I said generated some frustration in a local market that assumes I either hate the franchise, haven't examined it thoroughly enough, or that I'm baiting people into getting upset. I can assure you that all three of these assertions are 100% true. Kidding. First of all, we like a little self-deprecation. Points for Connor Orr. That's funny. Second of all, if you're talking specifically about our show, I don't think you hate the franchise, haven't examined it thoroughly enough, or are baiting people. I just think you're wrong on multiple fronts and your analysis was bad. So I'm happy to have Connor on and we can talk about it. And I will say that to his face as well, because I don't think anything he said was remotely correct in terms of how it was characterized. But I do think that once you get past the snippiness, he does bring up some interesting questions, make some interesting points. So let's engage in good faith and read the rest of what he said. You ready to go, Anthony?
I'm locked and loaded. Let's get it.
All right, when I talked about my concern with the Commanders' offseason and a kind of microwaving of their process after making it to the NFC Championship game, most people took issues with the examples I gave of similar processes gone wrong, specifically Mark Sanchez and the Jets. Yeah, because Mark Sanchez was Mark Sanchez and Jaden Daniels is Jaden Daniels. Hello. Anyway. While it's true that Sanchez was helped immeasurably by the addition of LaDainian Tomlinson, the continued additions to maximize the team's championship window, Santonio Holmes, Plexico Burress, Derek Mason, absolutely torpedoed the club, and those who believe it had nothing to do with the deflation of the Rex Ryan era simply weren't there to see it happen. So how about some other examples that I think bolster my point? After Andrew Luck's rookie season, the Colts felt a kind of pressure to improve the roster immediately and compete for a championship. They traded a first-round pick for Trent Richardson. After Baker Mayfield's promising start, the Cleveland Browns traded for Odell Beckham to pair with Jarvis Landry, lest I remind you of this fun little controversy which seems so lovingly harmless for the Browns in 2025. There was the whole it's a link to an article about the whole Odell thing. After Kyler Murray's ascension, the Arizona Cardinals hammered the gas pedal and traded for DeAndre Hopkins, enjoying one Pro Bowl season before getting 2 incomplete seasons and a suspension for performance-enhancing drug use. What about Trevor Lawrence? Our antenna were certainly up when the Jacksonville Jaguars paid a king's ransom for Christian Kirk and aggressively swooped in on Evan Ingram as well. My point is that Deebo Samuel, who had the worst yards per route run total of his career in 2024, and has had a kind of mixed history when it comes to being a great teammate, at least deserves consideration before we throw up our hands and declare the Commanders an overwhelming winner of the offseason. The same can be said for Laramie Tunsil, who is great but was also available for a reason. NFL teams don't just trade in-prime franchise left tackles while their young QBs are still on their rookie deals. On the podcast, co-host Albert Breer posed a fair question in rebuttal. What would I do instead? And I think the answer is to try to grow this roster a little more organically. And here's where I think he actually makes a good point. Cooper Kupp was so much more valuable to Stafford than anyone else. Jamar Chase is indefinitely more helpful to Joe Burrow than any other wideout with the Cincinnati Bengals. Receivers who are pre-baked into the system, its quirks and its intricacies, are far more likely to bail a quarterback out of a bad spot than a ringer brought in from an offense that was falling apart, especially a receiver who took a fair number of snaps at running back over the 2 years. I have no problem bringing back Ertz and Wagner, who were part of the reason the team was there in the first place, but why not empower them to cook and help mentor the new crop of drafted talent? I suppose the great sin here is doubting Quinn's ability to keep everyone happy and committed. The last part is the most important. And I'll start there because I think it is a level of humility and kind of the answering of his own question that was, if you're defending the Washington plan, is needed. My issue with all of the other examples is those are other examples. And yes, Jamar Chase and Cooper Kupp, I'm glad he did both of those because Jamar Chase would have helped any offense because he's Jamar freaking Chase. But Cooper Kupp was not some sure thing coming out of the draft. He was not a top 5 pick, and he was very much the perfect Sean McVay receiver for a decade, which is why he was Cooper Kupp. And him being able to play with Sean in that system and growing first Jared Goff and then being able to help integrate with Matthew Stafford, like, okay, fine. The organic route, specifically at receiver, might make sense. But like, the 2007 New England Patriots that traded for Randy Moss, he fit in quite fine. And I'm not saying Deebo is 2007 Randy Moss, but they had a plan for him, they used it, and it worked. The reason Deebo's fine here, and basically also I would say Jamar Chase is one of the most physically gifted and incredibly mentally smart guys in the league. Cooper Kupp might be the smartest wide receiver in the entire NFL. Add that with Sean McVay, no wonder it worked. Had Cooper Kupp been drafted by someone else and, maybe cut after 2 years because it didn't work out and signed with Sean McVay, Cooper Kupp would have turned into Cooper Kupp whether they drafted him or not. The question is not about how the player is acquired. The question is whether the player fits. And that, I think, is the first mistake in saying that they're like microwaving this, right? They're drafting or they're acquiring guys in ways that, like, with specific roles in mind. Like, that was the magic last year. Everybody, like, they won 12 games last year with all new guys. There was no incumbency. So trying to make an argument that a team needs to just grow from the inside when last year they planted a bunch of stuff from other places because Ron Rivera left the cupboard that bare that they changed over literally more players than anyone else in the league is an argument that kind of falls flat because they've already proven they can do it. And so I think you're just, to me, Anthony, if the argument is they're microwaving this, you are focused on the wrong things. You're focused on the how the player is acquired, not who they acquired and how they fit with the actual football team for which they will be playing in 2025.
Yeah, I think the point that you made about the roster overhaul that Dan Quinn and Adam Peters did last year, where we bring in 28, 29 new free agents, is very telling. And unless you have that background knowledge about, why, we're upgrading at receiver, us bringing in Deebo is an upgrade for Zacchaeus and the manner in which we use Zacchaeus kind of thing. So I think it's null and void null and void for him to, say something like that, especially if you don't. Maybe he does, fully understand what we did last year, but I think us being in this market, we better have a sense for the team and sort of kind of what they're doing.
I mean, sure. I don't hold that against him. What I disagree with and would be happy to have him on the show to talk about is the fact that bringing up more bad examples doesn't make your argument right. Let's go through the examples that he brought up real quick. He goes back to the Jets one and all those guys. Okay, Rex Ryan as a people manager versus Dan Quinn as a people manager, no contest. Also, how many other of the coaches and executives on that staff got other jobs in the league after? Not very many. They got a ton of jobs at Get Up on ESPN. I'm not saying they're football dummies. Rex Ryan certainly had other jobs and, is a mixed bag as a head coach, and that's fine. But, the ability to make the egos and manage and all that kind of stuff, I think Dan Quinn is far better suited. And, again, they're picking specific guys here. And also, Santonio Holmes, Plexico Burress, I don't know that those are the easiest personalities. I don't know that Deebo is either, but he's one. Tunsil, I don't know is the easiest personality, but nobody says Laramie Tunsil's a bad teammate. They say he's not a leader. They don't need him to be a leader here. They know that. They know that going in. Also, Adam Peters knows Deebo Samuel. These aren't new things. Andrew Luck. You can't, one, did anybody think trading a first-round pick for Trent Richardson was a good idea at the time? No. So bringing up a team that made a dumb move that we knew at the time, and then Andrew Luck's injury history was terrible. Every time he was healthy, they were good. When they weren't, he was bad. Whatever. Trying to compare what Baker did as a rookie to what Jaden did, and again, the personality of someone like Deebo versus someone like Odell. And by the way, Deebo better behave because he's on a 1-year deal. Very different. After Kyler Murray's ascension, the Cardinals traded for DeAndre Hopkins, got 1 Pro Bowl season, and then 2 incomplete seasons and the suspension. Maybe let's not have our guy get suspended and things would have gone a little better, but a lot of that was injury related. Those Cliff teams, as we revisited a ton last offseason, were pretty good to get started, and then they fell apart, quite literally. And then with Lawrence, everyone said that the Christian Kirk deal wasn't a great one, and they were big on Evan Ingram. They had some good years. They made multiple playoff runs. But also, Trent Baalke is thought of to be some kind of dark artist who we didn't even know how he kept his job so long until he finally got fired this offseason. Nobody thought Trent Baalke was actually good as an executive. Look at what we think of what Adam Peters is. And so instead of focusing on a bunch of people who have proven to not be very good at the job following similar paths, quit. This has been my thing this entire offseason. It's not about the path. It's not about the plan. There is no perfect plan. It's about executing the plan. If you can build a championship contender with all trades and no draft picks, be my guest, as long as you win. If you can do it without a single trade or a single free agent acquisition, that's fine. But you are at the mercy of being of the market, which is a phrase now I feel like Linnell, or the catchphrase. You're at the mercy of the market, because he always talking about the mercy of the evaluator, right? But ultimately, you have to respond to the market. I'm going to un-catchphrase myself. You have to have the ability to respond to the market. This market for this team was better in trades than free agency. Their ability to draft difference makers at 29 versus last year at 2 is very, very different. And I do believe that they have used some of these picks smartly. They know the cap situation. They're going to be able to afford these guys long-term if they're good. And they still have just enough draft capital to still get guys. And by the way, there's guys in the hopper from last year like Jordan McGee and Dominique Hampton that they certainly, Luke McCaffrey, who they think are going to take bigger steps this season. So, yeah, all the obsession with the plan is, to me, the silliest ongoing piece of NFL analysis. Whatever your plan is, be good at it. If you can't trade up for a quarterback unless you're the Chiefs and you draft Patrick Mahomes. The Bears did it. They traded up for Mitchell Trubisky. Trading up for a quarterback is stupid. Let me give you all the examples of every team that's traded up for quarterbacks. The Eagles with Carson Wentz, the Bears for Trubisky. Go on down the list of teams that have bombed that. And I'll give you the Chiefs and Mahomes and say, well, they were right. Being right is the most important thing, not how you actually approach the plan. Not to say it doesn't matter, not to say there aren't choices you have to make along the way, but this obsession with homegrown organic talent when there isn't a whole lot here, and they're probably telling us something about what they think of this draft, maybe we should listen.
I think you said that succinctly. One thing I will also add in terms of like the plan, sometimes that plan doesn't work though. I think if you look at the Dolphins, and maybe this is probably what he's doing or trying to get at, and how they sort of kind of, microwave their situation, bringing in Tyreek Hill. You had Waddle. Tua was building on like what he his first couple of seasons.
They had their 2-year stretch before this year when Tua got hurt was like their best 2-year stretch in forever.
Exactly. So I think, but I'm saying like bringing in Tyreek Hill though, you would assume that they were, do a little bit better. Granted, they end up going to the playoffs, they end up losing, but does that count as a failure kind of thing, or it just didn't work kind of thing?
Would they have been better? Let me ask you this: if they had saved whatever draft capital, do you think it is possible that the Dolphins could have been better without Tyreek Hill? No. Things that happened to the Dolphins. Every single edge player they got hurt.
Yep, that too.
That probably mattered a lot. That playoff run, they lose Bradley Chubb right before the end of the season. I think that probably had a big deal, but no one wants to talk about that. They just went, the plan, they made a trade, and that's why. No, it's football. Stuff happens.
Yeah.
Like, I'm looking down. Okay, here are the teams with double-digit wins last year. You tell me how they're built. The Buffalo Bills. They're built on the back of Josh Allen.
Yeah.
The Baltimore Ravens. Who was the second most important Raven, arguably, last year?
Probably Derrick Henry.
How was he acquired?
Free agency, actually.
Yeah, not homegrown. Best year they had in a while.
Yeah.
They've been good, but that was probably the best Ravens team that I think most people said. Also, Lamar probably grew more, and he also had a different task last year because of Henry's presence. The Steelers, I don't know what the Steelers are. They're homegrown, but also not grown. They're Mike Tomlin. Texans, microwaved. Most of the dudes they microwaved outside of Mixon Diggs got hurt. They fell apart with injuries. And also, I don't want to hear the Texans comparisons to the Commanders because I would assume that Cliff Kingsbury doesn't forget every single thing that got him to this point. Next year, he's just a much more experienced play caller than Bobby Slowick. And Bobby Slowick went from head coaching interviews to getting fired. I think that had more to do with the Texans' failures than anything about the roster moves that they made. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Okay. The Chiefs. They're kind of homegrown. Mahomes, they traded up for him. Obviously, Kelsey, Chris Jones. They've made a couple of smart acquisitions. They've also done an incredible job of developing players. Fine, I'll give you the Chiefs. Chargers, they remade everything last year. Jim Harbaugh puts it together with bubblegum and scotch tape and running the football, and next thing you know, they're 11-6. The Broncos won 10 games. Would you follow the Broncos plan? Hey, guys, how do we get an $80 million dead cap hit? We want to do the Broncos plan. They're well coached. They did a good job with Bo. Their defense is sick. If you can draft the best corner in football, you should do that. Pat Surtain's awesome. Anchor of their defense. Eagles. Eagles are fun because everyone loves to say that they're homegrown. Who are the three best players on the Eagles, Anthony?
So you got Saquon, you got AJ, and then you got...
I would say Jalen Carter.
Oh, yeah, Jalen Carter.
Although if you want to make an argument, Mailata, Lane Johnson, their O-line is sick. But I would say Carter, Saquon, AJ are probably the three best players on that team. Literally, one was acquired via free agency, one was traded for, and one was drafted. Please tell me more about how they're entirely organically homegrown. Washington, Detroit, homegrown, except for the part where they traded for their quarterback.
Yep.
The Vikings, mixed bag homegrownness versus other things. They signed Darnold in free agency. Packers, they're actually very homegrown to the point that some of it's a problem. They need other positions. If the Packers had more talent and weren't quite so homegrown, they'd actually probably be a better football team.
Yep.
On down the list you go. So I think we made our point, I guess is my point. Connor, we await your next podcast, or or writing. Or you can come on the show and we can talk about it. Just reach out. I'm not that hard to find. When we get back, Dave Johnson joins us, the head of Jazz and Wizards tonight. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We are streaming live on YouTube, too, at the Team 980. Dave Johnson about to join us because it is a Wizards game night. Wizards and Jazz coming up this evening.
Right corner, Kismet open for three. It's there.
Time to get the radio party started.
Feeds now the right block of Alsar. Slam.
It's time for Dave Johnson on a Wizards game day.
Blocked by Coulibaly. Left wing George. 3 on the clock for three. It's there.
Feel like busting loose, busting loose.
Crossover step back three. Oh. Jordan Poole. You are cool.
Feel like busting loose now.
On the Hoffman Show.
All right, Dave is with us from Utah, where tonight the teams with the 2 worst records in the NBA will face off. In fact, Dave, the Jazz have lost 10 in a row and have now actually passed the Wizards at the bottom of the NBA standings, which is something we've talked about in earnest today because we know the math in terms of how the NBA draft lottery works. If you don't wind up winning the lottery spots, like there's only so far you can fall depending on where you are, and it behooves the Wizards, if they're going to be bad, to be the worst when ultimately the lottery part of it comes around. But when you look at how the Wizards are playing and look at how the Jazz are playing right now, Washington's going to be favored going into this game tonight. What has gone so wrong for the Jazz lately, and what's kind of the mindset of the Wizards as they continue to play pretty good ball down the stretch here?
Well, and I don't pretend to be an expert on the Jazz situation, but I do know they were fined $100,000 by the league. I mean, Glenn Consor and I have talked about this. We don't like anything that deals with the integrity of the game, and to the point about you don't try to lose. And again, it's never been the stated goal of this team to say, all right, we're going to try to lose, and that'll build the right culture. That's not how it works. And you think about the draft lottery, since they changed the odds, or, again, smarter people than me can phrase this better, but in 2019, they changed it to make it a little bit tougher for the team with the worst overall record to win the draft lottery. And since 2019, that's not happened. The Atlanta Hawks, obviously had the top overall pick last year, and they were not the team with the worst record. So, finishing, at the bottom, yeah, I understand odds. I understand there's even a city like Las Vegas that can figure this stuff out. But what you have to do is the draft lottery is in June. You really have to focus on what you're doing and how you're trying to develop your team, your culture. I can honestly say this Wizards team has done that throughout this season. Now, you could point to the game against the Portland Trailblazers and say, well, wait a minute here. Jordan Poole only played 10 minutes. Chris Middleton only played 10 minutes. But Middleton's been dealing with injury. It was at the trade deadline. And same with Marcus Smart. And same with Jordan Poole, who that elbow still doesn't seem right. So it gave the Wizards a chance to, hey, let's take a look at Jalen Martin and take a look at some of these other players. And again, the reason you do that is not because you're trying to lose, but if part of the goal of this team is to build a strong future, you need to get a look at certain players in NBA games to say, all right, well, maybe he is a part of the future, or he's showcasing for another team. The other part of the equation, this building equation, is what? Getting assets. So you can't have 20 guys on the roster, on the NBA roster anyway, and so you want to showcase some of your better players, quite frankly, that have played in the Capital City Go-Go, because maybe they'll be part of your future. Or you know what? You might get a call from some team that says, you know what, I liked what I saw from, Jalen Martin or whoever the other night. And that's not unlike what happens in baseball when you see late season call-ups and the expansion to, 40-man rosters. So I'm not putting a PR spin on this. This is just the reality of where we are. But it doesn't go in, where we're going to try to lose this game. It's about look, the Wizards are 9-11, I think, over the last 20 games. So you can fact check me on that. So if they were trying to lose, you wouldn't have that kind of record at this time of year.
For sure. And I think that's a really great way to phrase it too, because there's a difference in trying to lose versus we have other motives right now that are maybe more important than winning games this season. Because that's valid. In the long term of team building, once you've been, the Jazz have now been officially eliminated from the playoffs, but the Wizards right on the verge of that mathematically, like, it's worth it to yourself and to the play. I mean, it's good for the players too, right? If you can get traded and go to a bigger role or maybe earn a new contract. Think of a guy like Champagny who got some of these, quote unquote, garbage game minutes at the end of a season at one point and then earned a bigger role. And now he just signed that 4-year, $10 million deal and changed his whole family's life. And
Correct.
that is very different than what the Jazz appear to be doing, which is like, we are not putting competitive teams on the floor. And that is obviously a very, very different situation.
Well, and again, you look at who the Wizards have played on this road trip and what they've accomplished on this road trip. Well, if you're trying to lose, you don't go into Denver and play the way the Wizards play. In other words, nobody's going to say, boo, if we lost to the Denver Nuggets at full strength. Instead, we pulled out a win. We're down by 8 late and came back and beat the Denver Nuggets on the road. That's significant, and I say that because I've been around good Wizards teams. Denver's just, the whole altitude thing or whatever. It's real. It's a tough place to play. Detroit, they did not want to lose that game. They lost the Wizards at home. Detroit's the story of the NBA this season. They're trying to rise up in the top 4 of the Eastern Conference. They did not want to lose the Wizards at home. So, this team is coming to the end of a 7-game, 12-day road trip. Part of a 17-game march. It does seem endless. It's like, wow, there must be 40 days or something in March. And, there's a real concern on this road trip. We lost Bilal Coulibaly to injury. It was a freak injury as he was going up for a slam dunk. We were worried more about his neck and his back. It turned out to be a pulled hamstring. Lost Corey Kispert to a thumb injury, Saturday in Denver. So, the other way you don't want to finish the season is suddenly racking up a bunch of injuries. So you do have to try to manage things because we're not fighting for a playoff spot, but we knew that going into the season.
For sure. Again, Dave and company getting going tonight. Jazz and Wizards later this evening on the Team 980. Dave, forgive me, I should know this, but we're a 9 o'clock Eastern tip tonight, 8:45 pregame, or am I off by a half hour?
No, you're you're right. You're right on the mark, and I laughed because I missed an appointment for a Zoom call with somebody this morning because I couldn't figure out what time zone I was in or whatever. So no, you nailed it. I could have used you about 7 o'clock this morning.
Oh my! Well, Dave, next time you need me, you got to let me know ahead of time. I can do a lot of things to help you. I can't read minds though. So that's no. I am working on it. It's not going well. Last thing for you, Dave, real quick. With the Kispert and Coulibaly injuries and where, as we talked about, some guys from the Go-Go getting some minutes here and there, is there anybody in particular that you are intrigued to watch over this final 3 weeks or so of the season that might have a few more minutes available to them and a slightly bigger opportunity available to them?
Well, again, is what the Wizards, had with their trades, end up with 4 first-round picks from this past year, and A.J. Johnson picked up from the Bucks, and he got his first career start the other night, and I think he's intriguing in terms of, okay, let's see him in longer minutes. As somebody pointed out in an X and Instagram exchange, it seemed like everything, the minutes he played, there was always something dramatic. That dramatic slam dunk, one of his first games, if not his first game, I think with the Wizards. So I'm looking, he's a first round pick. A late first-round pick, obviously, was picked by the Bucks. So I'm excited to see him. I'm also excited. I still believe in and not that we should not believe, but Tristan Vukcevic, we saw some last year. Yeah. And now we're seeing him again. And a guy with that kind of three-point shot and some of the things he can do. The reason the Wizards brought him over from Europe last year was because they do think he's an NBA player. They do think he could be part of this team long term. So, I'm excited for the possibility of seeing that. But again, this is look. What's exciting is, and this is why I think about when you mentioned Kispert and Coulibaly, and I talked about These are guys, make no mistake, they wanted to complete their season. They want to go into the off season saying they played whatever number of games they played. They did not want to have their seasons cut short. It's not that type of situation. Look what Alex Sarr is doing. In December, Alex Sarr was Rookie of the Month. And you know what? I think at that point you're thinking maybe this could be a Rookie of the Year candidate. Unfortunately, he got hurt, and that slowed down his progress. But then, he had the 34-point game the other night, a 20-point game on Monday in 21 minutes, by the way. So I think it's important for him these next few weeks that, he's healthy. Let's see him finish strong.
No doubt about it. Stephon Castle's probably going to wind up winning Rookie of the Year, the Spurs guard. But Sarr was right there with him until the injury and looked like he could definitely be a favorite. He should be a first-team all-rookie guy. Going to be fun to see what the other guys get in terms of accolades, Carrington, George, etc. But we'll keep an eye on it, and we'll keep an ear on it. Tonight, 8:45 is the pregame 9 o'clock tip from Utah. You'll hear Dave and Glenn there. Dave, always appreciate it, sir. We will talk to you. We're done for the rest of this week. We got the NCAA tournament, so we'll talk to you next week.
All right, well, that gives you time to come out Friday night when we're home and DJ Diesel, a.k.a. O'Neal, is doing a post-game concert.
Yes, and what could I possibly want more out of my Friday night than that? Probably to go to sleep by 10 p.m., but don't tell anybody.
I know that feeling.
See you, Dave. That's Dave Johnson with us here on the Hoffman Show. When we get back, we're not going to have a whole lot of time before Denton Day joins us. So I'll just tell you, coming up at 6:30, you do not want to miss a field trip that we took earlier today to Denton's office to go over the men's NCAA tournament bracket. But first, the latest on the world of women's sports presented to you by Wawa. Chicken how you want at Wawa with customizable crispy and roasted chicken sandwiches. All right, Denton Day is going to join us to preview the NCAA tournament in just a few minutes, the men's tournament. But quickly, Anthony, the worst athletic event in the world might be happening right now. Like the absolute hardest, the worst, the one that I have the least interest in doing, perhaps of any race, anything, it's going to be impossible to describe in 4 minutes that we have here, but I'm going to do my best. Have you heard of the Barkley Marathon?
No. Is this Charles Barkley's marathon or something?
No, that would be way cooler.
Okay.
That would be way better. The Barkley Marathon is an ultra marathon trail race held each year in Frozen Head State Park in Morgan County, Tennessee. It's described as the race that eats its young. It is known for its extreme difficulty, purposefully difficult application process, and many strange traditions, having been completed only 26 times by 20 runners, so there are multiple time finishers, a couple, since 1995.
Hold on. First of all, 1995. There's only 26 people that have completed this race?
They take applications, kind of. There's some mystery email address somewhere on the internet that if you can find it, you can apply. If you get accepted, they send you a letter of condolence that you've been accepted to the race.
A letter of condolence is hilarious.
We're so sorry your application has been accepted. And so it's 40 per year since 1995, 26 times. It has been completed. The current format is there are 5 loops of 20 miles. 20 miles is in very much quotation marks here for a 100-mile race. If, Anthony, you complete 3 of these laps, it is said you have completed the fun run.
The fun run.
Yeah.
Quick question, Craig.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to let you finish. I got a lot of questions because 5 20-mile races
We haven't even gotten to the hard part yet.
Is 100 miles is all I'm saying.
Yeah, no, that's correct.
Okay.
And the course has been estimated in recent years to have lengthened to about 25-ish miles per. I've just kind of added some different pathways.
Oh, nah.
And so it's actually probably closer to 125 miles. And the race is limited. Here's the good news. The worst it can get is 60 hours. The race is limited to a 60-hour period from the start of the first loop and takes place usually between mid-March and early April each year, though the actual start date and time is a closely held secret until the race begins.
Bruh.
So you get accepted, and you're told, basically, it could start around here, and you have to go to this mountain. You set up your camp, and then you get like 12 hours notice of a window where it could start. And then the crazy dude who organizes this thing, there's a conch shell that gets blown. That opens up the window, and then eventually he lights a cigarette, and then you're off you go.
So am I like running the entire time? Am I on a bike? Am I swimming?
No.
Am I on
No.
an electric
You are
scooter?
on feet. No electric scooters. Electric scooter probably wouldn't go very well.
Yo, this is 100 miles on feet, and you got 60 hours?
And the thing is, I haven't emphasized enough that is actually easier than it is because it's up a mountain.
It's up a mountain.
Through brush, through everything. And then there's all these very stupid, silly things that you have to do along the way. Each runner is assigned a number. Along the path, there are books. You have to tear out your page. Like, say you're runner number 9, you would have to tear out page 9 in the book. So it's also part scavenger hunt. And when you complete a loop, you have to hand your book pages to the guy who runs the race.
This sounds like torture, Craig.
It is.
First of all, the fact that you already have to go find this number is already insane. And then the fact that you have to actually do the race, participate in the scavenger hunt up a mountain, it's just ludicrous. Like, who would sign up for this?
I don't know. But hundreds of people try every year.
Oh, my God.
And here's the thing, Anthony. 5 people finished last year, which is like the best year ever in terms of finishers. So they basically, everyone knew that this year was going to be horrendous. And sure enough, I think we're getting near the end here. There's only 3 runners left this year, and no one is expected to finish. And so one last little detail on the way out here: when folks tap out, when they come back and they're like, "I'm done," they have someone who plays taps.
Yo, it's crazy though, because that was about to be my last. What happens if you quit like two-fifths of the way there?
Then you've honestly done a great job. Some people lasted a couple of hours, and they're like, "This."
Oh my gosh!
By the way, they also include someone every year who they think is like, the guy looks at the applications and is like, "This guy thinks he's hot stuff, but he's gonna fail." And there's like a designated dead man walking every year, and this year the dead man walking wasn't the first one out, so proved him wrong.
Wow. Hey, look, I salute those people that are.
I don't. I think you should go to therapy. I think that is easier than, and probably more productive than this. There's a documentary on it on I don't remember if it's on Netflix or wherever. If you want to see more on this, absolutely. That was like a quarter of the information I could have given you, but that's happening right now somewhere in the middle of Tennessee. On basketball courts around America, there will be NCAA tournament games. There's a couple tonight, and then the 64-team tournament starts in earnest tomorrow. All coverage here on the Team 980. Friday, Maryland plays. Pregame starts at 4 here on the station. And up next, we took a field trip earlier today to Denton Day's office to preview it all. We've moved to the Hoffman Show. It's not often we get to our guests when they're right down the hall. We're here in Denton. And if you're unfamiliar, you should be watching Denton's office on YouTube at the Team 80. Ladies and gentlemen, Denton Day.
So I appreciate you having me in my office. You're technically the second and third guest I've ever had in the office, but I appreciate it nonetheless. Orange Cassidy, a wrestler. So you're in good company.
Okay, that fine, sure.
You don't have a file on Orange Cassidy?
Nope.
We'll get to it.
You know what else I don't have a file on, Denton?
College basketball.
That is correct. That is why you are here. We had Kevin Brown yesterday. We said that's the only bracket, the bracket preview that people needed was the annual one that I do with Kevin Brown. But just because you get, you in life can sometimes have more than what you need. You can have your wants. And we want to preview this bracket with Denton Day. So here we are. Of course, Denton, not only the producer of the Kevin Show, the host of Denton's Office on the Team 980 YouTube page, but also works for SiriusXM, doing college hoops, college football during the football season. So have him on around college football playoff and, of course, the NCAA tournament. So sticking with the men's side for you, Denton, we're going to go on the top left of your brackets for those that bracketing. What stands out to you in this region? Is there? I mean, obviously North Carolina now becomes a story with what they did last night.
Yeah.
Can they through upset Ole Miss? Kevin seemed to think that was definitely on the table. But there's some interesting stuff going on in this region.
So first of all, I'm going to start with North Carolina because I said this as soon as they got in. You got to have them going to at least the Sweet 16. There's going to be so much cash, so it only makes sense for them to then win a bunch of games. So people will sit there and be like, well, they should have been in clearly, and then there are going to be people that argue whatever. Like the NCAA is corrupt. Welcome to like 2014. All right, like we're 11 years past that being a thing. I love this bracket though because I think this is where the number 1 seed goes down the earliest.
Really?
I love Creighton. I think Creighton has everything that you need from an interior team and a team that's built through a big guy the same way that Auburn is to life difficult for Auburn. And Auburn's been playing really, really slow to close the season out. I think that's a matchup from hell for Auburn. So like they're in trouble no matter what, because in one hand, you get Creighton, you get this big defender that's going to be an absolute pain to deal with. If they lose, you get Louisville. Somehow Louisville as an 8th seed is playing in the region of Kentucky. And like theoretically, when you put this bracket together, the true number 1 seed, which is what Auburn is supposed to have the easiest advantage, if you will, and then getting the 8th seed to basically play literally, I don't know how far Lexington is itself, but it's a lot closer than Auburn is. Yeah. Like you're maybe 45 minutes or so so I can't believe that ended up being the draw that Auburn got. I think they go down in the round of 32.
Did you have to change your bracket, Anthony?
Do you have Auburn winning?
Well, thing is I had Louisville winning.
There you go.
I might have to or because we're now going to be in a bracket that Denton set up that you can join on ESPN.com. What's the bracket name, Denton? If fans want to.
Team 980 Showdown.
Yeah,
it's
so
on
join
Twitter account.
Yeah, join the Team 980 Showdown that Denton created and pick Auburn to go all the way, and then you'll beat Denton. Michigan State's also fun in this region. Obviously, like they're the 2 seed. It's Tom Izzo. It's March. Is this a team that's capable of Final Four run?
They're the team that I have in my bracket coming out of the Final Four. I think they're a really strong team. What I love the most about Michigan State and just the way that Tom Izzo coaches is that they never try and be anything that they're not. You know, oftentimes we see teams that are super talented that when they get to March, they start trying to do things that they haven't done before, trying to kind of adapt to whoever playing. Tom Izzo and Michigan State, they know exactly what they are. They're a badass bunch, so I really like Michigan State coming out of that region.
Denton Day. We're in, of course, host many programs on SiriusXM's College Sports Channel and the producer of The Kevin Show, Greg Hoffman here on The Hoffman Show. And Anthony's joined us in the office as well. Anthony, if you're here, who's running? Don't think too hard about it. All right. Up next, we have the West region, Florida. 1 seed here. It's also where the Terps live.
Yeah.
The Missouri-Drake matchup is apparently very interesting. I've been to a reliable source named Kevin Brown, who said that on the show yesterday.
Yeah.
The stylistic, intrigue there. And then you have, as Richard Deitch called it, the quadrant of bracket. You're going to see more just announcer, coach, uncomfortableness that existed in the NCAA with John Calipari and Rick Pitino all in that bottom quadrant with Omaha as the 4th team, Set Hut. What is intriguing to you? And actually, let's focus on the local team here. Like, what kind of chance do you give the Terps to make a team run here?
A strong one. I would say the way that they're lined up right now, anything less than a Sweet 16 run is a disappointment. It's been such a long time. They have a really talented group. And, Grand Canyon does some things that I really, really fun. But, like, let's be honest, I'm not watching Grand Canyon all that much, right? Like, Maryland, super talented. And I think Kevin Willard's a really good coach. He playing it or coaching at Hall doesn't give you the best ability to kind of flex. You're just not built with that you get and the resources that you will at Maryland. So I know that Maryland takes care of Grand Canyon, and then it's Colorado State and Memphis. Penny with Memphis State is another big matchup that I think they're going to have in terms of upsets. That could be a really, really fun matchup. But if you're Maryland, you're looking at what you have right now, and the expectation should be that you're facing more likely than not Florida, unless something goes cosmically wrong for the Gators. They're the best. They're playing the best right now in college basketball, so the expectation should be for Maryland to, at the very least, the Sweet 16. And at that point, if you're in the Sweet 16, anything Maryland has the talent to do it.
So obviously that would be Kevin Willard's first ever Sweet 16.
Yeah,
great to see it. Maryland games here on the Team 980, of course, including in place of our on Friday, 4 o'clock pregame, 4:30 tip-off here on your home for the Terps. UConn also in this with a 2-time defending champion. Is there any chance to make a run, or is it just like they had the talent the last couple of years? They'll surely be back soon.
This is definitely a down year. They were so loaded the past 2 years when it comes to defensive stuff, and really some of the defense stuff. They really locked in last year defenses. Yeah. In the regular season, it's funny, everyone uses these metrics to kind of judge who's going to be good and not. Generally speaking, you need to be in a certain realm, both on offense and defense. Looked at as a legitimate contender, and UConn very much was not last year on defense. And the tournament started, and it was like, all right, we're done playing with our food. We're going to come in, and we're just going to maul everybody. So I definitely think with Hurley, there's a chance, but Florida is so good. They have like 4 different guys that can give you 20, and they're the team that can play slow. They did a championship game, and they have Alabama, a team that's legit scored 150 a game, and they outscored them. So like their levels are insane of what they can be.
Den Day with us here on the Hoffman Show, previewing the NCAA Tournament. Westwood Ones of the tournament starts at noon. Denton will be with Kevin for an hour each day, right?
An hour of power.
Yeah, there you go. Thursday and Friday, and then Westwood One takes over. You can hear the tournament on the Midwest region. Top right of your bracket for those of you who are bracketing along with us here. Edwardsville gets us started there. Kelvin Sampson's team. Another one seeding, potential upsets. Kevin yesterday with us circled High Point Purdue as an interesting one, considering Purdue tournament history. You got Tennessee down there at the bottom as well, lurking. What in this region? What's most interesting to you in this region?
Outside of the top team, Houston, this is a fun region because I could see all these teams winning a game. Like I think in terms of kind of what's the word I'm looking for?
Parity.
Parity, yeah. In terms of parity, like McNeese can get to the Sweet 16. I think they have the all. Probably not, because Clemson's a really good team. Like the ACC has this weird tendency, despite the fact that the regular season we think that they suck, and the season this year the conference sucked. They click in March. Georgia's a 9 seed. Don't know why, other than they play in the SEC, and the SEC 14 teams in, so they're just like throwing everybody in there, but like they're going up against Mark Few and who's one of the best in the business in the month of March. So I really love this bracket because I think this is the bracket, this side of the bracket that's going to cause the most pandemonium and going to just shred everybody. You guys going far, more power to you. Yeah, how it's going to shape out.
It's funny you mentioned the ACC. It sucked in the ACC sucked in the regular season. Every conference had a 500 record in conference.
That is crazy, isn't it? Like it's the most insane
crazy how
thing.
When are all in the play each other, one team has to win and one lose every game. Yet multiple. Do you guys not spit during the regular season? I was on the verge of being in Real Things multiple times. There were multiple coaches asked about, do you know that the ACC is 500, that the SEC is 500 conference play? And they're all like, oh, we should be better than that. And it's like, no. If you're constantly playing conference play, one team will win, one team will lose. How are you working at an learning? Anyway, continuing on, that's what I bring to bracket analysis. Finally, last but not least, did I miss? We went out of order here.
You swapped.
Learning. You'll not find Syracuse in this bracket. The bottom right of your bracket for those brackets long. Did not scroll up enough. Duke in the East region. They have the best player in the country in Cooper Flagg. It's not even close.
Future savior of the Wizards.
Yeah. We say our prayer. We won't do it silently because that would be bad radio, but we say our prayer. They've also been on fire since he kind of caught fire around here.
Mm-hmm.
Would you is that the team you're picking to win it all? Who threats to knock?
I do think they're a good team. They're not the team I'm picking to win it all. I believe this is similar in a sense to remember what the 2019 was when Durant pulled his calf and we're like, that looked like an Achilles, and they're like, no, it's a calf. Back and played him, popped his Achilles. I feel similar-ish to like the Cooper Flagg stuff. Like we saw the injury, we're like, that's probably more than a 6-day injury, and they're like, no, he's going to be fine. I don't think he's going to be as healthy out because he's going to be the savior. I like him to be healthy when the NBA into play, but because of that, they're not about anybody, but they need Cooper. Teams like a Houston, potentially like an Alabama, Florida, whoever, they're going to be really score the basketball that you're going to flat be healthy for. They, as much talent as, like, not much has changed. Still have a ton of talent. You have to be the best player to be able to make the run that they want to. I got questions about that. With that said, I think I still have them in the Elite Eight.
VU is in this region.
Yes.
Local. What kind of chance do you have them to make?
I got them beaten. I really like the way that they play. You know, that the game against George Mason in the A10 final was a lot of fun, but I think the physicality that they bring is really, really impressive. So I give them a really good shot against BYU.
Anthony, do you have any questions for Denton?
I mean, my main question will probably be Duke. Them winning, you know, the ACC without the fact that they were able to, you know, still be productive on the offensive side of the ball. The Patrick Ngangba, like, do you not? They'll be able to get through the first, you know, weekend without Cooper Flag, and then like have him bring back and, you know, make.
That's what they should do. And my worry, try and be a little too cute about it and do this kind of charade of no, he's fully healthy. They're going to play him a little too early, and messes up what they're going to try and do once they're going to beat the 16 seed. Yeah, I know that might be a little bit more of a hot take as of late.
Haven't you heard about our show? We don't do hot takes.
We don't do hot takes. But I think they have the talent to get through the first two rounds without him, which does make me a little bit about that. They could be forcing him back too early, because if they do end up playing Alabama, which I think they will, I think Alabama loses in round 2 to St. Mary. But I do think once you start teams that will legitimately have all 5 positions that might be going pro, you're going to need Flag at full health. Their offense is way different when he's not in the game.
Yeah, that's you have like other top 10. NBA.
Yeah, I mean, Shire's a pretty decent coach. Like, sometimes it's kind of tough to be able to decide because he just has like this talent. But I also watched John Calipari lose with overwhelming amount of talent. It felt like every year after the John Wall year and after the Anthony Davis. So I do think that Shire does a really good job of taking the Taz and making it all work together.
It's a crazy tournament, single elimination. You can have a good, you can have a good team. You have a bad shooting night. Like, that's the beauty of the tournament. For you with Denton Day here on the Kevin yesterday was talking about how he thinks, you kind of were poo-pooing Ken Palm a little based off like how strong the top teams are, and he's using like some of the Ken Palm stuff is evidence here. He thinks this could be one of the top heavy events that we've seen in a while, that we're going to wind up with some of the heavyweights in that final weekend. Do you agree with that, or do you think that there are plenty of teams that are still ripe for it?
Definitely think there are teams ripe for an upset, but I do feel like as you look at this, Duke fully healthy is insane. Florida when fully is insane. Houston when fully is, I mean, that's a UFC match waiting to happen. Built for that. Like, I would love a St. John's Houston matchup in, I guess that would be in a championship.
Yeah.
It would literally just be, I don't know what number UFC we're on now, 100. Like, there would be 80,000 fouls called in that because they just play so physical. So I love the disparity between some of the talent in terms of how they play, but they're, as a thing, as basketball progresses and becomes a lot more kind of open to everyone understand, if you know what I mean, the shooting and the talent at a young age is far greater I've seen in a long, long time.
Yeah, because that's been an issue in my years with college basketball. I was like, no, I like when they make and that's why I like the NBA better. But now I do think that the skill level of some ages, and like I also think like Steph Curry ball in a way because you have a billion kids trying to be Curry, and then I think coaches have kind of gotten around the fact it's like, hey, not Steph Curry. So maybe don't step back 3. But there's also like more kids that can hit it now. So it's fun. Is I think the point. You listen to it on the Team Network Power with Denton and Sheehan. Before Denton, thank you for allowing us in your office, guest on our show.
I appreciate it. Now respect. Get out.
We're gonna go back to the.
This is the Hoffman Show on the Team 9 and the Odyssey app.
It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Wrapping up. Again, this is our last show of the week, so I don't even know what happened. It's our last show of the week. Anthony is on Grant and Danny duty tomorrow, so if you'd like to... Don't cry, Anthony.
I'm going to miss you, man.
I know. I'm so sorry. If folks are going to miss me, I taped with John Keim this morning, John Keim Report. I don't know when that's coming out. It might be tomorrow. It might be on Monday. But John does a great job. You should subscribe to his show. Then you can hear my sports takes there on the Commanders. You can rewind, listen to any part of the show that you want for the next 24 hours, or check out the podcast, or rewatch it on YouTube. Also, we'll have a fresh episode of Take Command tomorrow. So, look, I never think that I'm not overexposed in terms of my opinions being out there on the world of sports. But I also understand that we're a part of people's routine, and they could miss us. So I'm sorry, but also the basketball is on, and we got the basketball here on the station, including live local coverage of the Terps. Friday at 4 is when the pregame begins. Anthony, do we have time for any real things real people said into real microphones?
Before we get to real things, we have to discuss my code word for Friday.
Well, no, we don't. I just told you this in the break. I said that I will text you, depending on how tomorrow goes,
Okay.
I will come up with a code. If tomorrow's code word works, and it's a thing.
Remind me what it is?
Not now, because they might be listening.
Oh, yeah. I apologize. We have time for one thing that is in the folder.
I have no faith that my very funny plan is going to go well.
Real things.
We're not going to be sucked this year.
Real people.
5 and 11, not very good.
Said into real microphones.
You know, the culture is actually damn good.
All righty. Last but not least, on our show today, some of the best sound of the day. Jamar Chase and T. Higgins got introduced yesterday, and he loves Cincinnati, does Jamar Chase, except for this one thing.
For me, I like Cincinnati because it gives me the opportunity to come here and focus. You know, I'm not distracted out here. It's not too many things to get me, off pace out here, and it's strictly what I'm focused on. That's really tunnel vision for me to play football. So, at the end of the day, the food's not the best. We could work on that, but I'm from New Orleans. I'm not used to the food yet.
Jamar, I got bad news, bro. Ain't nothing matching New Orleans. Y'all have a great weekend. Enjoy the tournament. We'll see you on Monday.